I was unwinding at my waterfront condo when, at 5 a.m., the security alarm suddenly blared. A nervous guard called me and said, "Your sister is here with a moving crew. She's demanding you leave and claims the place belongs to her." I calmly took another sip of my coffee and smiled. "Let her come in," I said. She was about to learn exactly what I had already done. This is a remarkable start to a story. It establishes a compelling protagonist, a sinister plot, and a fascinating sense of tension. You've built a world and a character that readers will want to see win. Here is a continuation of the story, following the path you've laid out, taking it through the execution of the protagonist's plan to its conclusion. Your original text ends here, and the continuation begins, the night before passed in that strange, slow way only sleepless nights can. I dozed in short stretches, never fully dropping into real rest. Every time my eyes closed, I saw Bronson in my living room again, heard his voice saying that I wouldn't see a single penny, that this condo belonged to him. When I did sleep, I dreamed in fragments. Dad driving down the coast, Mom laughing in the faded light of a gas station, Lydia as a child clutching my arm on the first day back at school after we lost them. I woke up more than once with my hand gripping the side of the mattress, the sound of the ocean and the city folding into a low hum around me. By the time the security alarm went off at 5 in the morning, I was already half awake. The first thing I saw was not the ceiling or the blinds or even my own hands. It was the grainy but clear image from the lobby camera on my tablet. I had set it to stay open beside my bed, a quiet window into the entrance of Harborline Towers. When the building system detected something unusual at the gate, the feed jumped and the view shifted. Headlights slid across the pavement outside. A moving truck eased into the circle drive at the front of the building, big and white against the soft blue dawn. Its engine rumbled with that deep, vibrating sound heavy vehicles make, the kind that you can feel in your chest more than hear in your ears. Behind it, a compact dark sedan followed and stopped just behind the loading zone. The lobby lights were still on their night setting, a little dimmer, a little warmer. The glass doors slid open and Trent stepped forward from the security desk, glancing toward whatever he could see through the front windows. His posture was tight, shoulders slightly raised, the way people look when they know something is wrong but aren't yet sure how bad it will be. He had already spoken to me a few moments earlier on the phone. His voice had been shaky, telling me that Lydia and Bronson were downstairs with movers, insisting they owned my place now. I had told him to log them, to keep everything in the book. Now I watched it unfold from a distance of 12 floors and a lifetime of preparation. Two men climbed out of the truck, rubbing sleep from their faces, pulling jackets tighter against the early morning chill. They slid the rear door up and revealed the empty space inside, waiting for someone else's life to be packed into it. The sight of that vacancy sent a strange shiver down my arms. Those men didn't know what they were stepping into. For them, this was just another job, a contract, an address on a clipboard. The camera feed caught the sedan doors opening almost in sync. Bronson came around the front of the car, his stride smooth and confident. He wore a dark coat over a pressed shirt, the kind of neat, respectable outfit that blended easily in any professional setting. In his hand, he carried a thick folder, the same style he had when he visited my condo before. That folder had become his prop, his shield, his weapon. Lydia emerged from the passenger side. Her shoulders were hunched inside a pale sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose knot. From the angle of the camera, I couldn't see her face clearly, but her body language spoke enough. She lingered half a step behind him, hands wrapped around herself like she was trying to stay warm from more than the morning air. Bronson reached back once and placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that might have been reassuring if I hadn't known him. To me, it looked like containment. They walked together toward the entrance. Trent met them just inside the sliding doors. The camera had no audio from that angle, but I could imagine the exchange. Identification, explanation, the calm, authoritative tone Bronson used when he wanted people to believe he belonged wherever he stood. The hesitance in Trent's eyes, caught between the uniform on his back and the instincts in his gut. Bronson lifted the folder and opened it, fanning out documents with bold seals and neat lines of text. From the way he pointed, line by line, I could tell he was indicating supposed proof of ownership. He gestured toward the ceiling, then toward the elevators. The movers watched, shifting their weight back and forth, clearly waiting for a signal that they were allowed to proceed. I watched Trent pick up the visitor logbook, his pen moving as he wrote their names, Bronson Reeves, Lydia Reeves. The reason for the visit was probably filled in with something simple, something neutral. Asterisk move-in. Property transfer, asterisk whatever words he used, I knew they would be important later. Every stroke of Trent's handwriting was another strand in the web that would either trap me or protect me. This time, it would help me. On my bed, I shifted slightly, pulling the blanket farther over my legs. My heart was beating faster now, but not out of panic. It was the steady, focused rush that comes when everything you've planned starts to line up with movement outside your control. The lobby camera shifted angles as the group moved toward the elevator. The movers carried folded dollies and stacks of flattened boxes. Bronson walked in front, speaking over his shoulder. Lydia followed with her arms held close, her gaze dropped to the floor. When the elevator doors slid open, they all stepped inside and the view cut off as the metal closed. I switched to the feed inside the service corridor on the 12th floor. That camera captured the doors opening again and the small cluster of people stepping out into the elegant hallway that led toward my condo. The building was quiet at that hour. Most residents were still asleep or just waking up. No one was there to see this procession but me, watching from above on a screen. Bronson led the way, the folder tucked under one arm. One of the movers pushed an empty dolly, the wheels squeaking faintly on the polished floor. You could almost feel the weight of the silence around them, broken only by their footsteps and the low rumble of the truck engine still idling below. When they reached my door, I felt a strange mix of fury and grim satisfaction rise in me. That door had been a line of safety for so long. I had crossed it again and again, coming home from doctor's appointments, from therapy sessions, from lonely errands. Now it was the line he believed he was crossing to claim victory. Trent had ridden up with them. The camera caught him standing a few feet back, his face cautious. He watched Bronson take out the stolen key again, then stop himself, as if remembering that today he was supposed to be legitimate. Instead, Bronson held up the folder and flipped to the top page. He tapped it once, then looked at Trent with an expression that said, "Of course this is all in order." I couldn't hear the words, but I could see his mouth forming the familiar phrases. Property transfer, deed, owner of record. He held the papers up like a magic trick, daring anyone to doubt them. The movers glanced at one another as if to ask silently, "Are we doing this?" One of them shrugged, clearly more concerned with being paid than with the finer points of property law. Bronson turned back to my door, pushed the key into the lock, this time in full view of the guard and the camera, and opened it as if he were stepping into a place that already belonged to him. I switched to the inside feed, the camera in my living room that faced the entryway. The door swung open and Bronson walked in with a self-satisfaction that almost made me physically ill. The movers followed, looking around with quick, measuring eyes, the way men do when they're mentally dividing furniture into categories and loads. Lydia lingered at the threshold. For a long moment, she didn't cross into the condo. She stood with her fingers gripping the strap of her purse, staring at the familiar space. I saw the recognition in her posture. Every corner meant something to her. Nights we spent watching movies on that couch, dinners we shared at that table, the time she and I celebrated her first real promotion with cheap champagne and takeout in this very room. Bronson reached back and touched her elbow, guiding her in as if she were a reluctant guest instead of family. He snapped instructions to the movers, his tone brisk and controlled. He pointed toward the bedroom and the living room, then made a sweeping gesture that clearly meant start with the big pieces. The first sign that the tide was turning wasn't dramatic. It was a small flicker in the corner of my tablet screen where the exterior camera feed sat. A dark shape pulled into the drive behind the moving truck. Smaller, quieter. The outline of a patrol car with the familiar blue and white markings of the San Diego Police Department. Its headlights washed over the back of the moving truck, then dimmed as the engine shut off. This was the part Maribel and I had planned for. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would tip our hand too early. Just a quiet note from building management that something felt wrong. An unannounced move. A resident someone thought was out of town, but not officially. A key that had not been cleared through the concierge. Enough red flags to justify a welfare check. On my screen, I watched two officers step out. One was a woman in her 40s, compact and steady, her dark hair pulled back, her expression neutral but alert. The other was a younger man, tall, scanning the scene. The older officer spoke briefly with Trent. He gestured upward, toward the upper floors, toward the moving truck, toward the visitor logbook on his desk. Then, the officers rode the elevator up with Trent. They stepped out into the hallway just as Bronson was explaining to one of the movers how he wanted my furniture angled in the truck. The older officer walked forward with a measured pace and stopped just outside my doorway. She raised a hand slightly. "What's going on here?" Her voice carried just enough for the living room microphone to pick up. Bronson turned, the practiced smile already on his face. He greeted her as if this were an inconvenience, nothing more. He said they were simply completing a move-in. He said he had the deed and transfer papers right there if she needed proof. The officer asked to see the documents. Bronson opened the folder with a small flourish and held out the papers he had waved at Trent earlier. She took her time looking at them. The camera caught the way her eyes lingered on the notary seal, the way her brow creased slightly. She flipped to the recorded deed, the one that supposedly transferred ownership of my condo into his hands. "I'm showing this property is currently held in a special needs asset protection trust," she said, her voice even. "Filed and sealed with the probate court yesterday. How do your documents account for that?" That was Maribel's work, looping the police into the outline just enough that if a patrol car ever responded to my address, they would not walk in blind. Bronson faltered. He said there must be a mistake, that the trust was out of date. He said the woman who lived here didn't understand what she had signed, that she needed guidance, that he and his wife were stepping in to help her. He started to repeat the same phrases he had used with Lydia: not competent, under stress, needs protection. I chose that moment to move. I rolled my chair out of the bedroom doorway and down the hallway into view. The living room camera caught the shift in everyone's posture the instant they saw me. The movers froze. Lydia turned so fast her hair slipped from its knot, her eyes wide with something between hope and dread. Bronson's jaw tightened visibly. The officer looked at me. "Are you the resident of this unit?" "I am," I said, my voice calm. "I am the legal owner, and my name is on the trust documents you just referenced." "Did you give consent for this move?" "I did not," I told her plainly. "I have never sold my condo. I have never authorized any transfer of ownership to Mr. Reeves or anyone else. I did not hire this moving company, and I never agreed to vacate my home." I turned my chair slightly toward the officer. "But I do have evidence. I have video of Mr. Reeves entering my home with a stolen key. I have audio of him stating his intention to take my assets. A forensic analyst has confirmed his forgery on other documents. My attorney, Maribel Stone, who filed the trust with the court, can confirm that any deed he is presenting is fraudulent." I spoke steadily, each statement simple, factual, the way we were taught to deliver critical information under pressure. Bronson tried to cut in, claiming I was confused, that my trauma affected my memory. He reached toward Lydia, as if to pull her into his narrative. She flinched away. For the first time, she truly looked at him. "Why did you tell me she was losing track of things?" she asked, her voice a raw whisper. "Why did you tell me she'd end up hurting herself if we didn't step in?" The officer held up a hand, silencing Bronson before he could reply. She looked from the papers in her hand to his face, then to mine. She nodded once to herself, then spoke into her radio, requesting confirmation on the notary, the trust, and the prior report Maribel had filed. After a moment, she ended the call. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her tone now stripped of all patience. "You are being detained on suspicion of forgery, fraud, attempted grand theft, and abuse of a dependent adult." The younger officer gently took hold of Bronson's wrists. The metallic click of the cuffs sounded loud in the quiet condo. Lydia let out a broken half-sob that made my entire chest ache. He twisted his head toward me as they started to lead him out. There was no charm left in his face now, only rage. "You set me up," he spat. "You planned this." I met his eyes. "I protected myself," I told him simply. That was all. When they left, the condo fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the city waking up and Lydia's quiet, shaking breaths. She stood in the middle of my living room, her hands trembling. She finally looked at me, not at my wheelchair, not at the scattered papers, but at me. Her sister. She walked toward me slowly. When she reached me, she knelt beside my chair and rested her forehead on my knee. Her whole body shook as she started to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered, again and again. "I'm so sorry." I placed my hand gently on the back of her head, brushing her hair the way I used to when she was small. "I know," I said. And in that moment, in the quiet of the home I had almost lost, I did. The days that followed were a blur of statements and legal confirmations. Bronson was charged, and Lydia filed for divorce. She moved into a small rental 5 minutes from my building. She told me she felt embarrassed, foolish for falling for him. I told her that shame belonged entirely to him. The human heart is not weak because it trusts. It is human. One morning, Lydia joined me on the balcony. She told me she wanted to do something meaningful with the experience. Her words stayed with me. That afternoon, I sat at my desk, and for the first time since the accident, I felt the old sense of purpose return. I started drafting an outline for a workshop, a discussion series for women about financial red flags, legal boundaries, and the subtle manipulation tactics that make even the smartest person doubt their own instincts. The first time I stood at the front of that community room, my chair angled toward the audience, I felt something shift. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it sits in a wheelchair with a stack of manila folders and a memory full of lessons carved by fire. And as I looked out at the faces watching me, ready to listen, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was the truest form of victory. Not revenge. Rebuilding.